All right, today, how many of you have ever heard the phrase from somebody else? You'll express something that you like, and they'll say, that's not real, blank. I've heard that all the time with music. I was a big fan of techno growing up, and somebody would always say, that's not real music. When I was in Chicago, one of the things, I would have some generic pizza, or I'd get like DiGiorno or something, and somebody would say, that's not real pizza. Some people in the Grand Rapids area, when I would drink coffee, they would say, that's not real coffee. I'll show you real coffee. It's like, all right, well, great. And you'll hear different things. You'll hear, that's not real art. That's not real jewelry. That's not real love or real happiness. That's not real work. I've heard that phrase come up too. I'd have a part-time job and somebody would say, when are you going to get a real job? It's like, okay. This is where I'm at. What am I doing? It's not fake work. You'll hear, that's not real news. That's not real politics. You'll hear, you're not really sick. This person is really sick or really hurt. And some people might even say, that's not a real church or that's not real faith. You see, when you hear these phrases, these are subjective statements. Subjective just means that they are based on opinions. They're neither true nor false. It's making a judgment about something in the moment with what you have experienced. They may be objectively true to you based on the facts that you've picked up. It might be true or false, but it's understood in a here and now moment by you. As that says, it can be understood by a robot. But essentially, that's just saying, in this moment, it is objectively true, maybe to you, but subjectively different to somebody else. This brought to mind, I'm going to get a little nerdy. One of my favorite philosophical paradoxes was called the Raven paradox. Ever hear of that before? All right, we're going to have fun. The Raven paradox essentially is this. It says, all ravens are black, which is true. But then, if anything is not black, then anything that isn't black also should not be considered a raven. So when you see a green apple, it's proof that there is a raven or a black raven. Does that kind of make sense? No, not at all. That's why it's a paradox, essentially. So what it's saying is, if a black raven exists, it's black and it's a raven because you understand it's black. But if you see a green apple, the proof that a black raven still exists is that that greenness or that appleness is not a raven. It's confusing, but essentially what it's saying is we tend to focus, we build evidences on things that may be true about different areas of life, but are not true about the initial thing. We focus on a lot of true things, but we tend to veer away from things that are not the primary focus. That's what the Raven paradox is trying to purport. And that's kind of what we're going to see today in 2 Samuel 20. We're going to see a lot of different things where our focus can easily go in so many different directions that may be true in the moment, kind of like the Raven paradox, where you see a raven as well as an apple. The apple may be a proof, but it's not a legitimate proof. Our focus can focus on so many different things that can veer us away from what is actually true. So my push to you is, when you fix your eyes on Jesus, everything else comes into focus. The primary verse that I want you to fix on is this, in 2 Corinthians 4:17. For this light and momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all. We can get so sucked up into stress or depression or anger or busyness. You name the affliction of the day. You name the distraction of the day. I mean, you probably get 200 to 1,000 different notifications a day on your phone, don't you? I do. I try to get rid of as many notifications as I can. But they are so alluring. And our mind gets so easily distracted by any little thing that can veer us away from what will truly give us life and wholeness and joy. So our goal is to focus on the right stuff. And what we'll see, as we see just in the previous chapter in 2 Samuel 19, David is coming back from running away from his son who was going to kill him after he usurps the throne. And his son is killed in battle. And David goes through a grieving process, and he's returned back to his people, and they're coming back home, and he's reunited with former enemies. He's reunited with friends. He's reunited with betrayers. He's got all kinds of things that are on his mind, but he's just fixed on getting home. And they get to the Jordan River, and they're about to cross it. But as soon as they get to the other side, they encounter the other 10 tribes of Israel. And in verse 41 of chapter 19, it says this: "But all the men of Israel complained to the king. The men of Judah stole the king and give us the honor of helping to take you, your household, and your men across the Jordan." The men of Judah replied, "The king is one of our own kinsmen. Why should this make you angry? We haven't eaten any of the king's food or received any special favors." But the 10 tribes in Israel, it says, "But there are 10 tribes in Israel," the others replied. "So we have 10 times as much right to the king as you do. What right do you have to treat us with such contempt? Weren't we the first to speak of bringing him back to be our king again?" The argument continued back and forth, and the men of Judah spoke even more harshly than the men of Israel. You know, it sounds so petty. They're trying to just get the king home, and they're fighting over who gets to take the king across the river, right? So they start this big fight, and it gets worse and worse, just trying to throw mud at one another. And this is about the idea of, like, who gets the right to do what they want to do? Who gets the privilege? Who gets the will? Who gets the opportunity? And this leads to a sharp dissent. After doing this great battle, you would think, we're going to go back to peace, right? We already got past the hard part, but then a new problem comes. And here comes Sheba. Sheba is called a troublemaker or a man of worthlessness. He is a man of Belial, someone who is of great sin. And maybe this was the author's amendation. It wasn't maybe the initial statement. Sheba was probably a high-ranking officer in the army at this point. It says, there happened to be a troublemaker there named Sheba, son of Bichri, a man from the tribe of Benjamin. Sheba blew a ram's horn and began to chant, "Down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse." Hear the distancing language? This is what Saul called David back in 1 Samuel. Won't even say his name after this point. He says, "Come on, you men of Israel, back to your homes." It's a rejection not only of the king, but of the kingdom. And not only just a rejection of the kingdom, but a rejection of the Lord's anointed, and namely a rejection of the Lord. But in this moment, where the argument is at its highest peak, where there is the most dissension, it was received. So in verse 2, all the men of Israel deserted David and followed Sheba, son of Bichri. But the men of Judah stayed with their king and escorted him from the Jordan River to Jerusalem. In this moment, this is a clash when it comes to the immediacy. Not thinking about the long-term effects, but thinking of how you feel so agitated in the moment and you want to get your desire passed along. It's those little fights that build up between couples. It's those little fights that build up between friends and family where you're so incensed and you don't know how to handle your emotions, but you just lash out. This is that moment. It doesn't last, at least in this part of the story, but this very same chant is said in the book of 1 Kings. And this is when the nations will forever split apart. But in this moment, at least the call is to say, we want nothing to do with you. We're going to go back to our own way. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to go back to the time of the judges where we did whatever we saw right in our own eyes. So that they're saying, when they say, we're going to return home, we want nothing to do with the inheritance that comes from David. It's not an immediate rebellion, but it is something that will build over time. It's something that escalates if it's not handled quickly. Conflict builds fast when emotions are incensed. David returns home, and what he does first is he handles affairs at home. As you might remember, Absalom, part of one of his first deeds as the temporary king, is he raped all 10 of David's concubines that stayed in the palace. So David takes care of the 10 women who were abused and hurt. So in verse 3, it says, David came to the palace in Jerusalem. He took the 10 concubines he had left to look after the palace and placed them in seclusion. Their needs were provided for, but he no longer slept with them. So each of them lived like a widow until she died. Now, it is a sad end in this case. It's the clash of misfortune. Was David right in doing this, in putting the women under guard and caring for their needs? It's hard to say. What he did here is he took care of them and their needs in a unique way so that they were cared for. If they were left on their own, they would not be able to care for themselves in this kind of culture. There's a lot of ambiguity of what actually happens in this, but at least their ending is just saying that he cared for them up to the point of their death. As sad as this is, we see that this is one of the distractions, this is one of the clashes that can come up in our life where misfortune can become so great we cannot see past this point. But when we have our needs provided for, we're able to look past that level of clash. Right after that, David turns to Amasa. Amasa, again, is one of the relatives of Joab, the commander of David's army. David wants nothing to do with Joab anymore because he probably hears news that Joab actually was the one who killed his son. So he replaces Joab with Amasa. Amasa, again, is the commander that was assigned to Absalom's army. So there's a quick set of events that happen that puts Amasa in this role. Amasa is likely a very young individual. He's also a very inexperienced individual. If you lead an army out to battle and you lose 20,000 troops in such a very short amount of time, are you a good commander or a bad commander? Not so good. So he's got a bad rap already. He was the enemy commander. He didn't do so well, but David says, go mobilize that army. He got 3 days to do it. Report back at that time. So Amasa went out to notify Judah, but it took him longer than the time he had been given. So he was not efficient for the job, or he was not received well as a leader. Verse 6, then David said to Abishai, he still doesn't want to talk to Joab. Maybe this is for the sake of revenge. Maybe this is trying to fix things, but what he's doing, this is the clash when it comes to not wanting to handle the situation directly. It's handling the situation secondhand or third hand and trying to avoid the problem directly. It becomes more and more difficult. But he goes to Abishai, the brother of Joab, and he says, Sheba, son of Bichri, is going to hurt us more than Absalom did. Quick, take my troops and chase after him before he gets into a fortified town where we can't reach him. What's going to happen if he gets to a fortified town? He'll be protected, just like David was protected when the Philistines were chasing him. If he's able to establish himself, especially as he's traveling around sharing this news that David is inefficient, he cannot be king, if he's able to continue sharing this message, steam will build. Rebellion will build. So this becomes a matter of urgency. Verse 7, so Abishai and Joab, together with the king's bodyguard and all the mighty warriors, set out from Jerusalem to go after Sheba. Joab wasn't involved, remember. David didn't want to involve Joab whatsoever. But the first thing Abishai does is he turns to Joab's men. He turns to Joab himself, and Joab is given the position. He sneaks right back in. Verse 8, as they arrived at the great stone of Gibeon, likely a place where they gathered for a war right beforehand, this was a popular meeting spot. Amasa met them. This commander who was supposed to do a great job to gather the army together, he comes back in the picture. And Joab, wearing his military tunic with a dagger strapped in his belt, he's in full regalia, he's ready for war, comes forward. He steps forward to greet Amasa, but out of his sheath goes his dagger to the ground. And in one sweeping motion, he says, how are you, my cousin? Reaches forward, holds the side of the face, as he took him by the beard with his right hand to kiss him, likely on the side of the cheek as a sign of greeting, as a sign of familial love. Amasa didn't notice the dagger that was probably coming up straight into his stomach. Joab stabbed him in the stomach with it so that the insides gushed to the ground. Joab didn't need to strike again. Amasa soon died. Joab and his brother Abishai left him lying there and continued after Sheba. Joab's not a nice dude, is he? I mean, this is at least the second time that he's killed a fellow commander. This is the third time he's gone after somebody with an A name. So if you have an A name, you're probably not safe from Joab either. But Joab, this is a clash of desire and threat. Joab desires the position, he desires the power, he desires the prestige. He wears it proudly. He likes to be the hero or the one in charge. And that's that threat with Amasa. So the natural thing for Joab to do is to eliminate the threat so he could stay fixed on mission. He doesn't handle it the right way, but it's his own way. It's the one way where he knows best. It's his mode of violence to be able to stay the guy. But afterwards, Abishai and Joab just carry on like nothing happened because in their mind, essentially the problem is solved. They just leave the body on the side of the road and they carry on. So friends, what happens when you're on the highway and an accident happens? Traffic, right? It's called rubbernecking. It's where it's like, what's that? I've never seen an accident before. Wow. And everybody's doing the same thing. Traffic slows down to the point where it's like, what are you supposed to make of this? It's the clash of confusion when a new problem comes, when this tragedy arises. I mean, this is the man that the people were supposed to follow. This is the man commissioned by David to be the new commander. Now he's dead. What are they supposed to do? When you lose your commanding officer, when you lose the most influential person to you, you get stuck, you get frozen, you get into a place where you don't know how to move to the next point. So verse 11 says, one of Joab's young men shouted to Amasa's troops, "If you are for Joab and David, come and follow Joab." But Amasa lay in his blood in the middle of the road, and Joab's man saw that everyone was stopping and staring at him. So he pulled him off the road and threw a cloak over him, because that fixes it, right? Nothing's there if you can't see it. With Amasa's body out of the way, everyone went on with Joab to capture Sheba, son of Bichri. So Sheba has gone on a very long journey at this point. Starting a little lower from here, they travel about 60 miles to the north, traveling through all these towns, and Sheba has had the opportunity to engage with all these people along the way in these major towns until he gets to Abel Beth Makkah. It's a hard word. So verse 14, meanwhile Sheba traveled through all the tribes of Israel and eventually came to the town of Abel Beth Makkah. All the members of his own clan, the Bichrites, assembled for battle and followed him into the town. When Joab's forces arrived, they attacked Abel Beth Makkah. They built a siege ramp against the town's fortifications and began battering down the wall. But a wise woman in the town called out to Joab. And imagine, this is loud. You're hearing probably a large log or a very heavy object pounding against the wall or pounding against the gate, and suddenly you hear, "Hey, listen to me, Joab. Come over here so I can talk to you." That's got to be a super loud voice in the middle of battle, right? And somehow Joab hears, and he stops. Everything stops in this moment. And Joab approaches, probably not too close, because the history of getting too close to a wall is people drop things over the wall on the commanding officers. So probably not too close, stay safe. And he approaches, and the woman asks, "Are you Joab?" He says, "I am." And she says, "Listen carefully to your servant." He says, "I'm listening." Verse 18, she says, then she continued, "There used to be a saying, if you want to settle an argument, ask advice at the town of Abel. I am one who is peace-loving and faithful in Israel, but you are destroying an important town in Israel. Why do you want to devour what belongs to the Lord? And I'm going to tell you right now, in this chapter, in this section, when there's a particular clash, and namely, this is a clash of crisis, when things are all going wrong, this woman, who is called a wise woman, she does one of the best things she possibly can. She doesn't focus on herself, but she focuses on the Lord. And she focuses on the attributes that are in the town devoted to the Lord, that it is peace-loving and faithful, and it is what belongs to the Lord. And her claim is that Joab is the one who will be defying the Lord by devouring this town. Her eyes are fixed on something completely different than herself. In crisis, she focused on the right stuff. She changed two potentially true things to the right thing. Kind of like with the raven paradox, where it's easy to focus on the apples, or easy to focus on any other object to prove that a raven exists. Joab was so focused on just trying to get Sheba that he didn't care that he was destroying other people along the way. This woman was focused on trying to settle the matter in the right way, and still trying to focus on how she could be God-honoring. So Joab replies, believe me, I don't want to devour or destroy your town. He has to stop and slow down. He has to question himself and say, what am I actually doing? What is the objective truth in this situation? He can either defy the Lord or continue what he's doing, but he slows down to focus on the real issue. Joab then says, that's not my purpose. All I want is a man named Sheba, son of Bichri from the hill country Ephraim, who has revolted against King David. If you hand over this one man to me, I will leave the town in peace. This is projection, because his mode is to focus on himself with the mission. He's focusing again on David, saying, this is all for David. You don't want to be against David, do you? It handles the situation in the moment because the woman accepts this. She accepts this condition. She says, all right, we will throw the head over the wall to you. I mean, that is, well, like, the woman is essentially saying, that's all you want? You want just one guy? Okay, hang on just a minute. Give me 5 minutes. Then the woman went to the people with her wise advice. They found him, cut off Sheba's head, and threw it out to Joab. It's like, oh, here you go. Okay. So Joab blew the ram's horn and called the troops back from the attack. They all returned to their homes, and Joab returned to the king at Jerusalem. So as this chapter began with a horn blown to say, we're done with David, it also ends by saying, we're done with Sheba. Joab is able to retain his power and his position. Now, what's unique about this is Joab becomes the commander of all Israel. When this list was made before, it would just say that Joab was just the commander of David's army. Now it says that he is in charge of all Israel. Who's really in control in this situation? When David constantly says, I don't know how to handle these guys, just let them do what they want. Who's in control? David or Joab? Joab has a lot of influence. Joab has a lot of power in this situation. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was the captain of the king's bodyguard. We're going to try our best. Adoniram was in charge of forced labor. So this was an institution of slavery at this point. And this traveled for multiple generations in these kingdoms, up to the point where the same argument that Sheba makes, again, because of this forced labor, also split the kingdom. This was instituted and created an instability within the kingdom. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the royal historian. Sheba was the court secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were the priests. And Ira, a descendant of Jair, was David's personal priest. And you see here, Ira is also not a Levitical priest. He is not sanctioned to be a priest. There's a lot of things that are going wrong in the situation. It doesn't have the former glory that it did before the fall with David and Bathsheba. When David committed both murder and adultery, when things started going down, the former glory is lost here. The instability has risen. And the legacy that is built, we skip ahead a couple chapters to 23, in 8 through 39, we see that the military legacy is what is left behind. David is called, in 1 Chronicles and 1 Kings, he is called a man of blood. He is not instituted as the one who can build God's temple because he has blood on his hands. He is a murderer in some respects, but he has become so fixed and focused on war that he has to have those constant reminders of who's actually getting the glory. I want you to pay attention as we go through this list, who actually is the one giving the victory. These are the names of David's mighty men. Josheb, wow, all right, we're going to try. Josheb-Bash-Hebeth, and, all right, we're going to skip some of these, okay? I can't even say some of them. I know Pastor Scott gives me a lot of credit, but these are tough. He was chief of the three, he raised a spear against 800 men, whom he killed in one encounter. I mean, that's crazy as it stands. Next to him was Eleazar, son of Dodai, the Ahohite. As one of the three mighty warriors, he was with David when he taunted the Philistines, gathered at Pas Damim for battle. Then the Israelites retreated, but Eleazar stood his ground and struck the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. The Lord brought about a great victory that day. The troops returned to Eleazar, but only to strip the dead. So, I mean, you already have two mighty warriors, but again, who gets the credit? The Lord. Next to him was Shema, son of Agim, the Hararite. When the Philistines banded together at the place where there was a field full of lentils, Israel's troops fled, but Shema took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and struck the Philistines down, and the Lord brought about a great victory. During the harvest time, 3 of the 30 chief warriors came down to David at the cave of Adullam, while a band of Philistines were encamped in the valley of Rephaim. At that time, David was in the stronghold, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. David longed for the water and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink from the water from the well that is near the gate of Bethlehem." He wanted the nostalgic feeling of the home that he grew up in. So the 3 mighty warriors broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David, but he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. "Far be it from me, Lord, to do this," he said. "Is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their lives?" And David would not drink it. Sounds kind of crazy, but essentially that's just saying, these guys did something insane. They were brave, but really, I want to focus on you, Lord, and I want to honor these people, so I give it to you as a thanks offering. I abandon my desires in these moments, and I give it to you. Such were the exploits of the 3 mighty warriors. Abishai, the brother of Joab, son of Zeruiah, was chief of the 3. He raised a spear against 300 men, whom he killed, and he became as famous as the 3. Was he not held in greater honor than the 3? He became their commander, even though he was not included among them. Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, performed great exploits. He struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. It's like, all right, good job. And he struck down a huge Egyptian. Although the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaniah went against him with a club. He snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. Such were the exploits of Benaniah, son of Jehoiada. He too was as famous as the 3 mighty warriors. He was held in greater honor than any of the 30, but he was not included among the 3. David put him in charge of his bodyguard. And again, among the 30 were Asahel, Elhanan, Shema, Elika, Helez, Ira, Abiezer, Sibekai, Zalman, Maharai, Heled, Ithai, Benaniah, Hiddai, Abi Alban, Asmatheth, Eliba, Jonathan, Ahiam, Elephelet, Eliam, Hezro, Pa-arai, Ilgai, Zelek, Naharai, Ira, Garib, Uriah. So all of these names, I guarantee you, are going to go great if you name them after your next child you have. If you're planning to have a child in the future, pick one of these names. They're great. I'm sure Gen Alpha or we're on Generation Beta right now, so they're great Generation Beta names. But you'll notice some names that pop up in here. Who pops up? Eliam is the son of Ahithophel, who is the one who led part of the revolt with Absalom. Uriah is the one that David slayed. But these people are included as some of the greatest warriors, even though they were blemishes in David's legacy. What do all these stories have in common, though? They're violent. They're acts of might. They're acts of valor. It takes a lot of great reminders to remember who actually gets the victory, though. We see the great exploits of these men and their mighty and violent deeds. But the real focus has to be drawn back to who is the one who actually gives them the victory. You see, if our focus is misaligned, if we get distracted and confused on what gives life fulfillment and wholeness, we can easily get sucked up into saying, this is the right thing. This business, this health of mine, this house I want, this car I want, this schooling that I want. You name what it is, this ambition you have in your life. If you receive it, if you get to that final point, if you get to that pinnacle, if that is your legacy, I guarantee you, you are misaligned in your focus. Because when you hit a point where you say, I've reached that point, now what? And you don't have an answer, you're going to fall. The focus has to be on Jesus Christ, who gives you eternal focus and a proper calling. The theory of war as it begins is this. One author says, the beginning of a war, like the beginning of a love affair, is rarely recognized at the time. You may already be in it before you see it for what it is. George Orwell says, a war always seems to be something you can put off until tomorrow, and yet, when it begins, it's often already too late. Another author writes, war is the unfolding of miscalculations. Why do we talk about war? Well, friends, you're in a war right now, whether you believe in God or not. You're in a war specifically for your soul. And what's at stake is eternal ramifications of whether you are near to a God who has given you life and purpose, or if you stay fixed on marching towards hell, which is eternal separation from God. You have that choice. And you have an enemy who specifically wants you to keep traveling on your own dime in your own affair. Spiritual warfare, how does it start? You see, what happens? I saw this reel this week that just really convicted me. You see, if you choose to follow Jesus, you may identify at first that you need a Savior, but what happens the next day when things are the same? When you don't have that magical experience or that spiritual high, when things become so stagnant, you're going through the same emotions, you're going through the same things, you've got to go through work, you got to go through school, you got to go through the same stuff. You're looking for that next spiritual high. What happens when things are just normal? And then life picks up when doubt and fear and boredom and difficulty to read and understand Scripture or difficulty to pray comes. What happens when temptations come? You'll wonder some days if you're growing doing at all, or if anything has even changed. You may question the calling, if you're fitted for this. Anxiety and depression kick in. Everyone around you and all the media point to the acceptance of violence, the acceptance of foul language, the acceptance of pornography, the acceptance of all different kinds of horrible practices in life. They point to wars, they point to disasters. And our focus can easily be misaligned to that. You may be reminded of all the terrible stuff you've done in the past. Nightmares and body aches and pains and troubles come. Thoughts of wanting to be done. Difficulty rising in life. Feelings of hopelessness creep in, and all the thoughts that spiral in your head of negativity pick up. This is life, friends. What Jesus is calling us to, the trick in life, is keeping your eyes fixed on the one who says, I'm greater than this. This doesn't hold you. I have a new identity for you. Ephesians 6:12 says, for our struggle is against not just flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of the dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. C.S. Lewis writes, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, the soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. And this person who had this reel, he says, you choose to walk with God, and when God calls your name, you get a bright target painted on your back. Remember that and stick close to Jesus. So how do you fight? Romans 8:37 says, no, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loves us. We're more than conquerors because we're trusting in the one who has conquered. We're trusting in the one who's already done it all, and he says, watch me. I've got a better way. Keep watching. Ephesians 6:13 says, therefore put on the full armor of God so that when, not if, when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. C.S. Lewis writes, enemy-occupied territory, that is what this world is. Christianity is the story of how the rightful king has landed and is calling us all to take part in a great campaign of sabotage. And Paul David Tripp writes this, we're always being spiritually formed. In one way or the other, the challenge is this. By what? What is your focus on? Is it politics? Is it your mental health, your emotional health? Is it the idea of truth that you've established for yourself, the subjective truth? Is it some kind of hurt? Is it some kind of habit? Is it some kind of hang-up? Is it your family? Is it your job? Is it your school? Whatever it is, what is forming you? What I want to encourage you with is this. Our eyes, our minds, our hearts have to be fixed on the right thing. This seems like such a simple story, but this is the dynamic that can tear our eyes, minds, and hearts off the right stuff. Jesus, when he was staying with Mary and Martha for a time, Jesus and his disciples were on their way. They came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to work by myself? Tell her to come help me. Anybody relate with that? You need help when things are too much. You got to feed 12, maybe more people, 13 big men. It's going to be a lot of food to prepare. But Jesus says, Martha, Martha, you're worried about so much. You're upset about so many things, but few things are needed, or indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Mary was focused on being near to Jesus. This time, Ignite can come up. The big idea I want you to focus on is this. When you fix your eyes on Jesus, everything else comes into focus. because you can be so easily distracted by so much. Our focus is easily misaligned. Our focus easily becomes distracted. We have to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. And to do that, we can focus on two things as we question who's in control. We could focus on God's word. As we read God's word, it is filled with God's promises that anchor us in the storms of life. We focus on God's King, namely Jesus. Namely, in the gospel, what is purported is that it is good news in an uncertain world. We don't know what's going to happen next. But in that unknowing of what will happen next, we can have faith that our Lord has already won. And we can trust him when things are all going wrong. In the past, Jesus has paid for your life in full. In the present, Jesus is at work in you. In the future, Jesus will make you radiant or glorified. You will be perfected in him. My challenge to you is this. With all of the loud voices in your life, with all of the spiritual battles and the dangers that creep in, when chaos hits, when conflict and temptation and anxiety come, it's easy to settle for what's just in front of us. We forget, though, that we're at war. We forget that we have a king who has already won. When you start to feel the doubt, or if you feel like that doubt is real, we have to focus, instead of just the green apples, we got to focus on Jesus here. Namely, not on what is loudest or what is most visible, but namely that Jesus is the one who is real, who looks past all the things that seem like they're right in the moment and shows us the fullest life, the wholest life, and the best life you could possibly have. My challenge, again, is to try to practice one of these two things this week. Because in all of our busyness, it's hard to stop. It's hard to be still. Try to do this at least for a week, if you can, for a month. You can pick 3 times in one day, any 3 times you want. Set an alarm. Go on your knees. If you can't go on your knees, just raise your hands like this and pray. God, help me. God, lead me. God, guide me. You can turn off your phone even just for 1 hour, like fully off. And in that moment, you get to choose how you want to spend that hour. Away from your notifications, away from your distractions, and focus on what it means just to be still in that moment. These are hard things for us to be still, but the encouragement is to see that Jesus is inviting you to a better and more full way to live. He wants your focus so that you focus on the right stuff.